This animated map shows Europe in July 1940. By this point, Adolf Hitler's forces had rapidly conquered nearly every surrounding nation. Austria, Poland, Norway, Belgium, Denmark, and France had all fallen under German control. Only one major country stood in the way of complete Western European dominance. The UK was effectively isolated across the English Channel, surrounded by hostile borders. Adolf Hitler assumed the math was simple. Facing overwhelming military odds and an isolated geography, he believed the British government would rationally surrender and sign a peace treaty. Winston Churchill refused. He made it perfectly clear to both his citizens and the advancing German army that Britain would fight on the beaches, in the fields, and in the streets, but they would never surrender. This refusal presented Germany with a massive geographic problem. There is no land bridge connecting the UK to mainland Europe, and the British Royal Navy possessed significantly more ships than the German fleet. To overcome this water barrier, Hitler had to attempt an invasion from the sky. The resulting air campaign brought immense destruction. German bombers targeted civilian centers, leaving massive sections of the London skyscape in ruins. But instead of breaking British morale, the attacks provoked severe aerial retaliation against Berlin. Because the British were defending their actual homes, their psychological motivation outmatched the invading forces. They successfully stalled the German advance, forcing a frustrated and increasingly power-hungry dictator to look elsewhere to expand his empire. Despite already fighting a massive war in the West, Hitler broke a non-aggression pact and turned his sights toward the Soviet Union. He believed capturing a territory as vast as the Soviets would give Germany enough land and resources to surpass any nation on Earth. This map illustrates the scale of that ambition. In June 1941, he launched a massive three-pronged invasion. One force moved north toward Leningrad, a second pushed straight for Moscow, and a third cut south through Ukraine. Using a strategy of rapid mechanized warfare, known as blitzkrieg, highly advanced German tank divisions swiftly broke through Soviet lines and captured vast stretches of territory. But that speed created a fatal logistical trap. By moving eastward rapidly, German supply lines stretched incredibly thin, just as the brutal Russian winter hit. Sub-zero temperatures physically incapacitated the German army. Equipment froze and troops lacked proper winter gear. This severe weather shifted the advantage directly back to the Soviet defenders, who were well adapted to fighting in the extreme cold. By attempting to absorb the most expansive terrain on the planet, the German military had stretched its physical and logistical capabilities to a breaking point. While Germans froze in the east, a separate conflict exploded in the Pacific. In December 1941, Japan launched an unprovoked attack on America's Pearl Harbor. This wasn't limited to the Pacific for long. In strategic solidarity with Japan, Hitler declared war on the United States just days later. This choice turned America's massive industrial base and troop numbers against Germany, officially merging these separate conflicts into one global war. Meanwhile, back on the Eastern Front, the German army engaged in the Battle of Stalingrad. It became the deadliest prolonged conflict of the entire war, ultimately ending in a total defeat that devastated German troop numbers. To the south, Hitler's alliance with Italy was actively collapsing. Set up with the war and harsh living conditions, armed civilians, known as partisans, revolted against their own government and executed dictator Benito Mussolini. By the end of 1943, aggressive expansion had created a coalition of highly motivated enemies. The world's major powers were now fully synchronized in a multi-front counterattack. On June 6, 1944, a coalition of British, American, and Canadian soldiers landed on the beaches of northern France, opening a massive western front against the occupying German army. Looking at the map, you can clearly see the direct consequence of overextension. Germany was caught in a closing vice, with millions of Allied soldiers simultaneously pushing inward from the west, the east, and the south. The Soviet army steadily regained its territory and pushed straight into the German capital. With Berlin completely surrounded and his empire dismantled, Hitler took his own life, leading to Germany's formal surrender. The global fighting continued for another 2 months in the Pacific theater, only coming to a final close after the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japanese cities. The total collapse of the Nazi regime was the result of a military machine failing under the pressure of fighting across thousands of miles of territory against 3 industrial powers at once. In the aftermath, the Allied powers physically redrew the map of Europe. They divided Germany into distinct eastern and western territories and shifted the boundaries of neighboring nations like Poland to reflect a new balance of power. To prevent a conflict of this scale from repeating, the international community established the United Nations. It provided a formal global framework to mediate disputes before they escalated into open warfare. To maintain this peace, former enemies France and Germany formed the European Coal and Steel Committee. The goal was to make their economies so interdependent on materials like coal and steel that a future war between them would become physically impossible. This cooperation eventually grew into the European Union. By replacing military expansion with economic integration, these nations have managed to maintain a period of peace on the continent that has lasted